In the small town of Clearwater, surrounded by snow-capped mountains, lived a man called Nathan. December had always been a challenging month for him, not just because of the cold that penetrated his soul, but because it was a time when loneliness seemed to weigh heaviest. The year 2024 had been especially difficult, full of trials that tested his faith and willpower. He had lost his job, some friends had moved away, and many nights he felt like a candle about to burn out. However, something in December seemed different. It was as if an invisible force was calling him to reflect, to look beyond the pain and see the purpose behind everything he had faced. Nathan was a man of faith, but even the most faithful sometimes doubt. He began to feel that this December was not just another month on the calendar. It was a call to something greater. One evening, while walking through the streets illuminated by Christmas lights, Nathan stopped in front of an antique store. In the middle of the shop window was a golden hourglass with bright blue sand. There was something mesmerizing about this object, something that seemed to call him. Entering the store, the owner, a white-bearded gentleman called Elijah, smiled warmly. "You've been called, haven't you?" Elijah said, as if he already knew why Nathan was there. Nathan frowned. Called? Called for what? Elijah handed him the hourglass. "This is your December, a time to close cycles. Use this month to understand that each challenge was a gift in disguise. The sand inside this hourglass symbolizes the time you have to discover the purpose behind everything." Nathan took the hourglass home, feeling intrigued and a little nervous. He put the object on the table next to his bed, and that night he had a deep and vivid dream. In the dream, he was in a forest, surrounded by shadows that whispered words of doubt, fear, and hatred. Each shadow represented something he had faced over the year. Jealousy from work colleagues, bullying from superiors, gossip that had hurt him deeply. The shadows seemed alive, trying to pull him down, but somehow he knew he had to face them. When Nathan woke up, he felt that something inside him had changed. He looked at the hourglass and realized that the blue sand was flowing. There was no way to stop time, but there was a way to use it wisely. In the following days, Nathan began to encounter situations that seemed to test his patience and faith. Old acquaintances appeared, bringing up painful memories. He received messages from people who had spread gossip about him, apologizing, but he knew that forgiveness was not so simple. Michael stood motionless in front of the hourglass, but inside him, a whirlwind of emotions was unfolding. What was to many just an inanimate object seemed to be alive to him. A constant reminder that time is both relentless and merciful. He stared at the falling grains of sand, each carrying a meaning that he was only just beginning to understand. The sound of the sand, so soft and subtle, seemed to echo in his mind like the ticking of a clock. Each grain that fell evoked a memory. First came the happy moments of his childhood, his mother's laughter in the kitchen, the warmth of his father's embrace, and playing with his older brother on summer days. He could almost smell the homemade bread and hear the distant sound of the radio playing Christmas songs. But then the flow of memories changed. The most difficult memories came, the ones he avoided revisiting. The fight with his brother that was never resolved, the day he lost the job that supported his family, and the feeling of emptiness that took over his life when his marriage ended. Every grain that fell seemed to weigh tons now, laden with regrets, pain, and decisions he wished he had made differently. "Why does it hurt so much?" he muttered to himself. The silence of the hut responded with a cold embrace. Yet Michael knew he was exactly where he needed to be. God had brought him there for a purpose, and even though he still couldn't see the full plan, something inside him whispered, trust. He closed his eyes, and a question began to arise in his mind. What if every grain of sand is a lesson? Perhaps the weight he felt was not a punishment, but a preparation. Perhaps everything he had experienced, the pain, the losses, the joys and the triumphs, was part of something bigger. In the quiet of the hut, Michael began to remember people who had passed through his life. First came the faces of the people he loved, his family, his closest friends, those who had supported him when he needed it most. But like shadows emerging into the light, there were also the faces of people who had hurt him. His brother John was the first to appear in his mind. They had been inseparable in childhood, but a fight over their father's inheritance had torn them apart. How long has it been? Thought Michael, trying to remember the last time they had spoken. The memory of his brother turned into an invisible knife in his heart, and he realized that he had been carrying that weight for years. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. He couldn't change the past, but he knew he could change the way he related to it. "I forgive you, John," he whispered. The words weren't easy, but they had a power he hadn't expected. As he released them, he felt as if an invisible chain was being broken. But Michael knew it wasn't over yet. He needed to go deeper. He needed to forgive himself. He remembered the mistakes he had made, the times he had failed the people he loved. He remembered the times he gave up too soon or let fear dictate his decisions. Each memory was like a stone that he carried in an invisible backpack. "I forgive myself," he said, his voice breaking. "I forgive myself for being human." From that moment on, he began to feel something different, a lightness he hadn't experienced for a long time. Forgiveness wasn't just a gift to others. It was a gift to himself. Michael held the hourglass in both hands, feeling the cold of the glass and the rough texture of the carved wooden base. He had never thought much about hourglasses before. They were just curiosities he saw in bookstores or antique shops. But now, in front of that piece, something seemed different. The sand falling slowly through the narrow passage had an almost hypnotic effect, as if each grain fell in sync with his heartbeat. He observed each grain as a representation of his days, hours, and moments, each one unique, but part of a greater whole. A question arose in his mind, like a whisper from the depths of his soul. How much time do I have left? But instead of anxiety, this question brought unexpected clarity. It wasn't about how much time he had left, but about how he would choose to use the time he had. As the sand continued to fall, Michael began to reflect on the meaning of what was in front of him. He asked himself, what if every grain of sand was a choice, a decision that I have made or can still make? It was such a simple idea, yet so powerful, that he felt a new energy fill the room. Time, he thought, was God's most precious gift. It wasn't something he could control, but it was something he could shape with his actions and intentions. The sand keeps falling, but I can decide what to do while it's falling. The rebirth of purpose. With a deliberate gesture, Michael turned the hourglass. He watched the sand begin to fall again, but this time he felt something different. He wasn't just watching, he was participating. Turning the hourglass was more than a physical movement. It was a symbolic act of his decision to start again. He felt as if God was by his side, whispering, I'll give you another chance. Use it well. Michael took a deep breath. With each grain that dropped, he began to release the weight he was carrying. He thought of all the times he had let fear guide him, when regret had paralyzed him. But now, with every passing second, he was leaving those things behind. Michael turned away from the hourglass and sat down by the fire. The crackle of the fire filled the room, a peaceful soundtrack to his thoughts. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees and holding up his hands as if he were about to pray. But before he could begin, a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. I have so much to be grateful for. He began to list, silently, all the things he was grateful for. First, the great blessings, the health he still had, the roof over his head, the people he loved, even those who were far away. But then, he started to think about the little things, the ones that usually went unnoticed. The warmth of the fireplace on that cold night, the sound of the wind outside that made the cabin seem even more welcoming, the simple fact of being alive to experience another day. Gratitude began to transform his state of mind. He realized that, even in the most difficult times, there was always something to be thankful for. Thank you, God, for every challenge that has made me stronger. Thank you for the lessons that came disguised as pain. Thank you for never abandoning me, even when I felt lost. With each word, he felt like he was cleaning out his heart. It was like opening windows in a stuffy room, letting fresh air in. Michael realized that gratitude wasn't just a response to good times. It was a daily practice, a choice to find beauty even in adversity. Michael stood in front of the window for a long time, watching the stars in the clear, cold sky. There was something deeply comforting about that vastness, a sense that, although he was small, he was part of a much bigger plan. The reflection of the moon in the snow seemed to whisper something to his spirit. Go on. There's no more time to lose. The decision to start again was not new to him. He had already promised himself many times that he would change. But that night, in front of the hourglass and under the starry sky, it seemed different. It wasn't just a passing desire, but a deep commitment, anchored in a force he felt beyond himself. Michael knew he had to turn this desire into action. He went back to his desk and opened a notebook that he had kept, almost forgotten, in a drawer. It was a simple notebook with a worn brown cover, but each blank page seemed like an invitation to write a new chapter in his life. He held the pen, hesitated for a moment, and then began to write. 1. Releasing the past. I need to let go of what I can't change, he wrote. The words came out with difficulty, as if pulled from a deep well. He began to list the regrets he carried, the sorrows that held him back, and the fears that paralyzed him. For each item, he wrote down a small symbolic act he could do to leave it behind. Perhaps it was writing a letter that he would never send, or even lighting a candle and watching the flame consume the representation of what he needed to let go of. Michael reflected on the moments in his life when he felt betrayed or wronged. There was a childhood friend he had never forgiven for a silly quarrel, and a boss who had humiliated him years ago, but whose shadow still hung over him. He realized that by carrying these pains, he was giving these people power over his life. I need to forgive, not for them, but for myself. Only then can I move on. 2. Embracing the future. The next part of his list was about what he wanted to embrace. Michael began to write down words that brought light to his heart. Courage, love, patience, faith. He wrote down specific things he would like to accomplish. Rebuilding relationships with distant family members, getting back into the habit of reading the Bible every morning, and, above all, finding ways to serve others. I want to live a life that has meaning, he thought. I want my actions to reflect my faith, my gratitude, and my desire to make a difference. 3. Act with purpose. Finally, he wrote down practical actions that he needed to take immediately. Starting small was essential. He knew that big changes required consistent steps, not giant leaps. He planned the next few weeks carefully, from waking up earlier, to creating space for moments of meditation and prayer. Each small habit felt like part of a larger mosaic, a work that was just beginning. He knew that these actions weren't just for him. They were for all those whose lives he would touch. God has given me a purpose, and now it's my responsibility to fulfill it, he murmured, with a determination he hadn't felt for years. When he had finished writing, he looked at the words on the page. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The list wasn't just a plan. It was a declaration of who he wanted to be from now on. The night was cold, but the warmth of the fireplace and Michael's decision filled the room. He switched off the lights, letting the flame of the fire dance on the walls of the room. Sitting down again next to the hourglass, he felt a deep silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of stillness that carried promise, that allowed him to hear the whispers of the divine. Michael closed his eyes and prayed. God, I don't know what the future holds, but I trust in you. Guide my steps. Show me how to be a light in this world. I'm ready to follow you. He felt a wave of peace invade his heart, as if invisible hands were holding him, firm and gentle. He knew he wasn't alone. He never had been. That night, Michael had a dream that would stay with him forever. He was walking through a vast field of snow, barefoot, but he didn't feel cold. In the distance, he saw a large hourglass shining like gold in the winter sun. The sand inside it seemed to flow upwards, not downwards, as if time was being restored. As he approached, a figure appeared next to the hourglass. It was a man dressed in white, with eyes that seemed to reflect all the love in the universe. Wordlessly, the man pointed to the hourglass, and then to Michael's heart. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. It's in your hands, Michael heard, although the man's mouth didn't move. He looked at the hourglass once more, now feeling an unshakable certainty. Time wasn't just something that passed. It was something he could transform with faith, action, and purpose. Michael woke up at dawn. Sunlight poured into the room, illuminating every corner. He looked at the hourglass on the table and, for a moment, had the feeling that it was glowing with a slight gold. Or maybe it was just the light reflecting off the glass. He smiled, feeling a quiet joy. He knew he would still face challenges. He knew that in a few days, the old fear might try to return. But now he had something he had never had before, an unshakable confidence that he was not walking alone. He was ready to start again, to turn every moment into an opportunity to live meaningfully. Michael's story is not just about him. It's about me, you, and everyone who, at some point, finds themselves on the brink of an important decision. His journey reminds us that, although difficulties are inevitable, every challenge is an opportunity in disguise. Every fall is a chance to get up even stronger. Michael turned his hourglass and decided to start again. Are you ready to do the same? Turning the hourglass symbolizes more than starting over. It's an act of courage, a gesture that declares to the universe, I'm ready to use the time I've been given intentionally. When we turn the hourglass, we choose to leave the past behind, not as a denial of what was, but as a recognition that it has played its part. Just as Michael faced his fears, faced his past, and made the decision to move forward, each of us is called to do the same. Perhaps you carry old hurts, regrets, or even a sense of stagnation. Today you have the chance to turn your hourglass, to let go of what holds you back and embrace what God has prepared for you. Michael realized that carrying the weight of the past didn't allow him to move forward. Releasing his sorrows was like letting go of an anchor that kept him stuck in the same place. Like him, you may have something you need to let go of, a wound that still hurts, guilt that won't go away, or even fear of what lies ahead. Letting go is not easy. It's a process that requires humility and faith. It means trusting that God is in control, and that by letting go, you will make room for new blessings. Just as Michael found peace in writing down his intentions, you can start with a small gesture. Write a letter, say a prayer, or simply take a deep breath and say, "I give this to God." Turning the hourglass, Michael made a conscious decision to move forward. He chose not to be defined by what he had lost, but by what he could still achieve. This decision, although simple, is a powerful milestone. It's the moment when we stop being passive spectators of our lives and take on our role as protagonists. The same goes for you. No matter how difficult the year has been, or how many times you've felt discouraged, the power to decide is always in your hands. Choose to move forward. Choose to forgive. Choose to start again. Michael's journey is also a reminder that we are not alone. In every step he took, God was there. In the little coincidences, in the moments of silence, and even in the vision of the hourglass in the dream. Just as he guided Michael, he is also guiding you. We often feel that God is far away, especially when we face difficulties. But it is precisely at these times that he is closest, whispering words of encouragement, sending signs and opening up paths. Trust in his presence. Even if you can't see the whole road, trust that he is illuminating every step. December marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. It's a natural time for reflection, a time to look back and give thanks for the lessons learned, but also to look forward and dream of what's to come. Ask yourself, what have I learned this year? What do I need to leave behind? What do I want to take with me into the next chapter of my life? Michael found his answers by connecting with God and himself. You can find them too. Take a moment of silence today. Close your eyes, take a deep breath and ask, what is God calling me to do? Listen carefully. Sometimes the answer comes as a whisper. Other times, as an unshakable certainty in your heart. What makes Michael's journey so inspiring is not just his decision to change, but the courage to act. He didn't just think about starting again. He took the first steps. He wrote down his intentions, prayed fervently, and began to implement small changes in his routine. Now it's your turn. What can you do today to take the first step? Perhaps it's a simple act of kindness, a heartfelt prayer, or even the decision to seek help for a challenge you're facing. Every little step counts, because that's how great transformations begin. Michael was not alone in his journey, and neither are you. There is a community of chosen ones around him, people who share his challenges, his victories, and his faith. This is the time to connect with that community, to share your stories and to support each other. In the comments, share your intentions for this new cycle. Write something like, "Today, I decide to turn my hourglass and start over." Don't underestimate the power of declaring your intentions publicly. It not only strengthens your commitment, but also inspires others to do the same. If you're wondering where to start, the Chosen 40-Day Devotional is a powerful tool to help you deepen your connection with God. It offers daily reflections, prayers, and teachings that can guide you on your journey of transformation. This isn't just a devotional, it's an invitation to reconnect with your faith, your purpose, and the strength that exists within you. Set aside some time each day to dedicate to these reflections. Allow them to nourish your soul and strengthen your resolve to live a meaningful life. I am George, your spiritual leader, and it is an honor to walk alongside you on this journey. May God abundantly bless you, your dreams, and all the steps you are about to take. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, The best is yet to come.